Dr. James Wilson stood at the window of Pioneer 1's main control room, watching the red dust devils dance across the Martian surface. The base had been his home for the past 6 months, and sometimes he still couldn't believe they had actually done it. Humans had finally built a permanent settlement on Mars. The year was 2045, and Earth had pushed them to this point. With rising sea levels and declining resources back home, humanity had no choice but to reach for the stars. The International Space Coalition had united the world's space programs for this single purpose, making humans a multiplanetary species. Dr. Wilson, you need to see this. The voice belonged to Tom Baker, one of the construction engineers. His usual calm tone carried an edge of excitement that made James turn away from the window immediately. "What is it?" James asked, following Tom through the pressurized corridors of Pioneer 1. Their boots clanked against the metal flooring, the sound echoing in the artificial atmosphere of the base. "We were drilling for the new water recycling facility," Tom explained as they walked. "Standard procedure, going down about 50 meters. But we hit something that shouldn't be there." They reached the construction site, where a small crowd of workers had gathered around the drilling equipment. The hole they'd made was roughly 2 meters wide, with reinforced walls to prevent collapse. But it wasn't the hole that caught James's attention. It was the images being displayed on the portable scanner screen. The scanner showed perfect geometric shapes embedded in the rock layer, too regular to be natural formations. Squares, triangles, and hexagons arranged in what appeared to be a deliberate pattern, all at a depth where nothing man-made should exist. "How far down?" James asked, his scientific mind already racing through possibilities. 47 meters, Tom replied. "We've already checked. There's no record of any previous missions drilling at this location, and these patterns extend beyond our current drilling site." James pulled out his tablet and began documenting everything. As the lead scientist of Pioneer 1, he knew this discovery would change everything. "Get me Dr. Thompson," he said to his assistant through the comm system. "If anyone can make sense of these patterns, it's our archaeologist." Within an hour, Dr. Mary Thompson arrived at the site, her eyes widening as she studied the scans. "These aren't random," she said, her finger tracing the patterns on the screen. "They're too precise, too organized. This looks like, well, it looks like architecture." "Architecture," James repeated. "Are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything yet," Mary said carefully. "But whatever made these patterns, it wasn't natural forces, and it certainly wasn't us." The next 12 hours passed in a blur of activity. More scans revealed that the patterns extended in all directions, covering an area of at least several hundred square meters. The ISC back on Earth was notified, and an emergency meeting of the base's senior staff was called. "We need to expand the drilling site," James announced to the gathered team. "Whatever's down there, it's been waiting to be found for a very long time. And now that we're here, we're going to find out what it is." As the meeting ended and plans were made, James returned to his favorite spot by the window. The Martian sunset painted the sky in shades of pink and orange, and for the first time, he felt like an intruder on this alien world. They had come to Mars thinking they were the first intelligent life to walk on its surface. Now, staring at the scans of those mysterious patterns, he realized how wrong they might have been. In his quarters that night, James wrote in his personal log, "Day 187 on Mars. We came here to ensure humanity's survival, to become a species that could live among the stars. But today's discovery suggests we might not be the first to have this idea. The patterns we found are just the beginning. I can feel it in my bones. Humanity's rise to a multiplanetary species is about to take a turn that none of us could have planned for." He had no idea how right he was. 3 days of non-stop drilling had transformed the discovery site into a hive of activity. The hole was now wide enough for a small elevator platform, and the walls had been reinforced with sturdy metal supports. Dr. Mary Thompson checked her suit's oxygen levels one last time before stepping onto the platform with Dr. James Wilson. "Ready?" James asked, his voice slightly crackly through the radio. Mary nodded, and Tom Baker, operating the controls, began lowering them into the darkness. Their helmet lights cut through the gloom, illuminating the rusty walls of Martian rock. At 40 meters down, the geometric patterns began to appear, more clear and detailed than the scans had shown. "Look at the precision," Mary whispered, running her gloved hand over a perfectly straight line cut into the rock. "These aren't just patterns, they're words." The platform stopped at 50 meters depth, where the patterns opened into something that made both scientists catch their breath. A corridor stretched before them, its walls smooth and metallic, untouched by millions of years of Martian dust. "Control, are you seeing this?" James called through his radio. Crystal clear came the response from above. "The whole world is watching, Dr. Wilson." They stepped off the platform, their boots making soft metallic sounds against the ancient floor. Their lights revealed more writing along the walls, but unlike anything seen on Earth, the symbols seemed to shift and change as they walked past, as if alive with their own inner light. "It's responding to our presence," Mary said, excitement clear in her voice. She pulled out a handheld scanner and began taking readings. "These walls are made of some kind of smart metal. It's still active after all this time." They followed the corridor, documenting everything with their helmet cameras. After about 50 meters, it opened into a vast chamber. As they entered, lights began to flicker to life along the walls, activated by their movement. "Impossible," James breathed. "This place still has power." The chamber was filled with what could only be described as workstations, curved desks with strange displays and control surfaces. Everything was built for beings larger than humans, making them feel like children in an adult's office. Mary approached one of the workstations, her scanner beeping excitedly. "James, look at this," she called. As she waved her hand over the surface, a holographic display flickered to life, showing a three-dimensional image of Earth. "It's some kind of observation post," James said, moving closer. The image of Earth rotated slowly, showing different time periods. They watched in amazement as the continents shifted and changed. Ice ages came and went, and life evolved from simple cells to complex organisms. "They were watching us," Mary said. "All of us. Everything that ever lived on Earth." She moved her hand again, and new images appeared, complex diagrams and charts that seemed to track something specific. James studied the displays, his scientific training helping him make sense of the patterns. "These aren't just observations," he said slowly. "These are experiment parameters. Earth wasn't just being watched, it was being monitored, like a controlled experiment." A new hologram appeared, showing humanoid figures much taller than any human. The text beside them shifted and changed until it became readable English. "Project status. Experiment duration. 4.5 billion years. Species development. Accelerated beyond parameters. Warning. Intervention protocol initiated." Mary's hand shook as she recorded the message. "James, I don't think we were supposed to find this place." "Not yet." "No," James agreed, watching as more text began to appear. "And I don't think we were supposed to reach Mars this soon either. Someone was running an experiment on Earth, and we just stumbled into their laboratory." Above them, unnoticed by either scientist, a signal began pulsing from the ancient facility, reaching out into the depths of space. Humanity had found the observation post, but they weren't the only ones who knew they were there. The next 24 hours at Pioneer 1 were the longest of James Wilson's life. Every major space agency on Earth had their best code breakers and scientists working on the alien data they'd found. The base itself was now running on high alert, with constant scans of both the ground facility and the space around Mars. Mary hadn't left the alien facility since their discovery, working tirelessly to decode more of the strange text that kept appearing on the holographic displays. It was as if the facility itself was slowly waking up, revealing more information with each passing hour. "James, Mary's voice crackled through the radio. "You need to see this. Now." He made his way back down to the facility, finding Mary at a new console they hadn't activated before. The hologram above it showed a timeline, but not like any he'd seen before. It stretched across millions of years, with Earth's history marked in strange symbols. "I've figured out their measurement system," Mary said, her voice tight with worry. "According to this, humanity wasn't supposed to achieve space travel until the year 12,045. We're 10,000 years early." James felt his stomach drop. "What do you mean, supposed to?" Mary waved her hand, and new images appeared. They showed Earth, but not as it was now. The continents were different, the atmosphere had a different composition, and strange creatures roamed its surface. The architects, that's what they called themselves. They didn't just watch Earth. They made it. Mary's hands moved across the controls, bringing up more data. They seeded planets across the galaxy with life, running different experiments to see how species would develop under various conditions. "And we were one of these experiments?" James asked, though he already knew the answer. "We were supposed to be a control group, a baseline for natural development." Mary pointed to a series of charts. "But something went wrong. Or right, depending on how you look at it. We developed consciousness and technology far faster than any other experiment they'd run." The facility hummed around them, and new warnings began flashing across the screens. James recognized the pattern. It was the same warning they'd seen before, but now there was more information. "The intervention protocol," he read aloud as the text translated itself. "It's not just a warning. It's an automated system. When species develop too quickly, He stopped, his face going pale. "It resets them," Mary finished. "James, look at these records. Other species on other worlds. When they advanced too quickly, the system activated, and..." She couldn't finish the sentence. James rushed to the main console, trying to access more information about the protocol. The facility responded to his urgency, displaying new data. "It's already starting," he said, his voice hollow. "The signal we detected yesterday, it wasn't just an alert. It activated defense systems throughout the solar system." As if to confirm his words, alarms began blaring in Pioneer 1 above them. Through their radio, they heard Tom's panicked voice. "Dr. Wilson, we're detecting massive energy signatures appearing throughout the solar system. Something's powering up out there." Mary's fingers flew across the alien controls. "The protocol has 3 stages," she read. "First, isolation, cutting off the planet from space travel. Then, evaluation, determining if the species can be safely slowed down. And if not, James pressed. Complete reset. All technology above a certain level is destroyed." Mary looked up at him, her face visible through her helmet visor. "James, we have less than 72 hours before Stage 1 begins. Once it starts, we'll be trapped on Earth and Mars, waiting for the system to decide if humanity deserves to survive." James stared at the warnings flashing around them. They had found the observation post, but it had come with a terrible price, the very achievement that had brought them to Mars. Becoming a spacefaring species had triggered an ancient system designed to prevent exactly that kind of rapid advancement. Humanity's greatest achievement was about to become their greatest threat. Commander Robert Hayes stood in the control room of the ISC's largest spaceship, the Defender, as it broke away from Earth's orbit. 6 other ships followed behind, each carrying the best pilots and engineers humanity could gather on 12 hours' notice. The mission was simple but seemed impossible. Find and disable the alien defense systems before they activated. "Status report," he called out to his crew. "Energy signatures detected near Jupiter's orbit." "Commander," replied Jack, the ship's sensor operator. "They're getting stronger by the minute." Through the main viewport, Earth looked peaceful and blue, showing no sign of the crisis they faced. Robert checked the mission clock. 58 hours remaining before the isolation protocol would begin. Back on Mars, James and Mary worked frantically in the alien facility, searching for any information that might help. They had managed to download some of the facility's data to their tablets, but the ancient systems were complex and full of traps. "Look at this," Mary said, pointing to a new hologram. It showed a network of satellites and stations throughout the solar system, all part of the defense grid. The architects built backup systems for their backup systems. Even if we disable one, others will activate. James studied the display. But there's always a weakness. Every system has one. He moved his hand through the hologram, spinning it to show different angles. These stations, they're all connected to the main facility here on Mars. They're waiting for the final activation signal. On the Defender, Robert received the data from Mars. "New plan," he announced to the fleet. "We're not going to try to destroy the defense stations. We're going to intercept the signal before it reaches them." The ships spread out across the solar system, positioning themselves between Mars and the newly appearing defense stations. Each captain knew it was a desperate move. They had no idea what kind of signal they were trying to block, or if their ships could even detect it. Hours passed. On Earth, governments prepared their people for the worst. If they failed, humanity would be cut off from space travel, possibly forever. The ISC headquarters in Geneva had become a center of frantic activity, with scientists and military leaders from every nation working together. "Wait," Mary said suddenly, her voice breaking the tense silence in the Mars facility. "James, look at these power readings. The system isn't just sending a signal, it's building up energy for something bigger." James ran the numbers through their computers. The defense stations aren't just going to cut us off, he realized. They're going to create some kind of energy field around Earth and Mars. That's how they trap developing civilizations. He grabbed his radio. "Commander Hayes, the stations are going to generate a containment field. If you try to block it with your ships, we'll be torn apart," Robert finished, understanding immediately. He looked at the energy readings on his own screens, which were now off the charts. "But if we don't stop it, humanity loses everything we've worked for." The clock showed 40 hours remaining. The defense stations were now visible to the naked eye, glowing with building energy. On Mars, James and Mary raced to understand the alien technology. On Earth, billions waited to learn their fate. And in space, 7 ships and their crews prepared to face technology far beyond their understanding. Robert stood at his command station, watching the strange lights grow brighter. They had one chance to get this right. If they failed, humanity's dream of reaching the stars would end before it truly began. But if they succeeded, well, that would prove they were ready for the cosmos, whether the architects thought so or not. "All ships," he commanded, his voice steady. "Battle positions. Whatever happens next, we show them what humanity can do." James stared at the holographic display, his tired mind trying to make sense of what he was seeing. He and Mary had been working for 20 straight hours, searching through the architect's data for anything that might help the fleet. With 32 hours left before the defense system activated, every minute counted. "This can't be right," Mary said, checking her translations again. "According to these files, the architects ran the Earth experiment over 50 times before us. They kept resetting everything and starting over because something kept happening that they didn't expect." "What was it?" James asked, moving to look at her screen. "Consciousness, or at least their version of it." Mary brought up a series of brain scan comparisons. "Look at these. The architects designed the human brain to develop in a specific way. Basic tools, basic society, slow and steady progress over tens of thousands of years. But something happened that they didn't plan for." On the Defender, Commander Hayes listened to their transmission, while watching the defense stations grow brighter. "Explain it in simple terms, Dr. Thompson. What makes us different?" "Stories," Mary replied. "We tell stories. We pass knowledge down through generations. We learn from the past and imagine the future. The other experiments, they develop tools and basic language, but they never made the leap to abstract thinking and generational learning." James suddenly straightened up. That's why we developed so fast. The architects designed our brains to learn, but they didn't expect us to teach each other so effectively. Every generation didn't have to start from scratch. We built on what came before. In the alien facility, new displays came to life, showing the history of human development. Cave paintings became written words, became books, became computers, became spaceships. Each step happened faster than the last, because each generation stood on the shoulders of those who came before. The defense system sees this as a dangerous mutation, Mary explained. It's programmed to stop species that develop too quickly because fast development usually means aggressive expansion. But we're different. We developed fast because we share knowledge, not because we're dangerous. On Earth, the ISC headquarters received this information with growing excitement. The scientists there began poring through human history, looking for more evidence of this unique trait. Dr. Wilson, one of them, radioed from Earth. We found something interesting. Throughout human history, every major breakthrough came from combining old ideas in new ways. We don't just pass on facts. We teach each other how to think. Commander Hayes listened to all this while watching his tactical display. The defense stations were now forming a visible network, energy flowing between them. "This is fascinating," he said, "but how does it help us stop these stations?" James looked at the facility around them, seeing it with new eyes. The architects built this place to observe and control. They designed everything about it to work in a specific way, following specific rules, just like they tried to do with us. "But we don't follow rules the way they expected," Mary added, excitement growing in her voice. "We find new ways to solve problems. We look at things differently than they do." "Exactly." James turned to the main console. "We've been trying to understand their technology by their rules. But maybe that's not the answer. Maybe we need to do what humans do best, find a completely new way to look at the problem." The facility's lights flickered as if responding to his words. Around them, the alien technology hummed with building power. They had just over 30 hours to find a solution, but for the first time since the crisis began, they had something the architects never expected: a human way of thinking. High above Mars, the defense stations continued their preparations, unaware that the very trait they saw as a flaw might be humanity's greatest strength. 20 hours remained on the countdown clock when James made the breakthrough. He had been staring at the alien facility's main control room, watching how it responded to their presence, when something clicked in his mind. "The whole system works on recognition," he said, jumping up from his chair. "It's not just checking for technology levels. It's looking for patterns it knows." Mary looked up from her own work. "What do you mean?" "Watch this." James walked to different parts of the room. Every time he moved, lights followed him, displays changed, and the system adjusted. The facility doesn't just observe us. It learns how we behave, what we do, how we think. That's why it knows we're developing too fast. On the Defender, Commander Hayes listened intently. His ships had spread out in a defensive formation, ready to try blocking the defense station's signal. But now he held them back, waiting to hear James's idea. "If the system learns from patterns," James continued, "then we can teach it new ones it's never seen before." He turned to the main console. "Mary, help me with this. We need to show it how humans solve problems." The next few hours were a blur of activity. James and Mary began using the facility's systems in ways the architects had never intended. Instead of following the logical, step-by-step processes it expected, they jumped between ideas, combined different approaches, and found connections that only human minds could see. "Look," Mary pointed at a new display that had appeared. "The system is trying to understand what we're doing. It's learning from us, just like we learn from each other." On Earth, the ISC scientists watched the data streaming in from Mars. They added their own insights, sending back suggestions and ideas. It was exactly what humans had always done: sharing knowledge, building on each other's thoughts, finding new ways forward. Commander Hayes watched his tactical display as something strange began to happen. The defense station's energy patterns were changing, responding to whatever James and Mary were doing in the facility. "The whole network is connected," James explained through the radio. "Everything the architects built works together, sharing information. When one part learns something new, they all learn it," Mary finished. "Commander, we need your help. Get your ships as close to those stations as you safely can. We need to show the system something it's never seen before." Hayes gave the order, and the 7 ships moved into position. Each captain had been briefed on the plan. A plan so unusual that only humans would have thought of it. "Now," James said, "have each ship approach their station differently. Show them 7 unique ways to study and interact with unknown technology. Show them how humans explore." The ships began their demonstration. One scanned its station with radio waves, another with light. One measured magnetic fields while another studied gravity patterns. Each approach was different, creative, uniquely human. In the facility on Mars, displays flickered with increasing speed as the defense system tried to process what it was seeing. It had been programmed to recognize and stop dangerous patterns of development. But this was something entirely new. "It's working," Mary shouted, watching the readouts. "The system is learning that fast development doesn't have to mean danger. It's seeing how humans use knowledge to understand, not to destroy." James watched as the countdown clock suddenly froze. New messages began appearing on the screens. Not warnings now, but questions. The defense system, programmed to think in straight lines, was learning to think like humans. With just hours to spare, humanity had done what it did best, found a completely unexpected solution to an impossible problem. They hadn't beaten the system with force or technology, but with something far more powerful: the human ability to think in new ways. 1 month after the crisis, Pioneer 1 had changed beyond recognition. The Mars base had doubled in size as new teams arrived to study the alien facility. But the biggest changes weren't physical. They were in how humanity saw its place in the universe. James stood at his familiar window, watching shuttles come and go from the busy landing pad. Beside him, Mary was reviewing the latest data from the defense system, which had become humanity's greatest teacher. "Another signal came in this morning," she said, looking up from her tablet. "The system found 3 more experimental worlds. All of them are at different stages of development." Commander Hayes, who had been appointed as humanity's first space defense coordinator, joined them at the window. His fleet now patrolled the solar system, not to fight, but to learn from the ancient technology they had once feared. "How many does that make now?" he asked. 12 worlds, James replied. "Each one a different experiment by the architects. Some are just developing basic life. Others are close to where we were 1,000 years ago." The defense system, which they now called the Guardian Network, had completely changed its approach to humanity. Instead of seeing their rapid development as a threat, it recognized humans as something new, a species that could help guide and protect others. "Look at this," Mary said, bringing up a holographic display. It showed one of the experimental worlds, where creatures similar to Earth's early humans were just discovering fire. "The system thinks they might develop consciousness like ours. They're already showing signs of teaching each other." James smiled. "And this time, they won't have to worry about being reset if they develop too quickly. We can help make sure they're safe while they grow." On Earth, the International Space Coalition had become the Interstellar Development Council. Every nation worked together, preparing for humanity's new role as guardians of developing worlds. The knowledge left behind by the architects had advanced their technology by centuries, but more importantly, it had given them a purpose. "The first observation station will be ready next month," Hayes said, pointing to a construction site visible from the window. "From there, we can monitor all the worlds in this sector, just like the architects did. But we'll do it differently. Because we understand what it's like to be the experiment," Mary added. "We know the importance of letting civilizations develop in their own way, at their own pace." The Guardian Network had shared more than just the location of other worlds. It had given them access to millions of years of data about how life evolved, how consciousness developed, and how civilizations grew. But it was humanity's understanding of teaching and learning that made this knowledge truly valuable. Message from Earth. A voice called over the intercom. The first group of students has graduated from the new Xenological Development Academy. They're ready to begin their training here on Mars. James looked at the red planet's surface, remembering how different things had been just a month ago. They had come to Mars seeking a backup home for humanity, expecting to find a dead world. Instead, they had found humanity's true purpose. You know what the best part is? He said to his companions. Every civilization we help will bring something new to the galaxy. New ways of thinking, new kinds of consciousness, new approaches to problems, just like we did. Through the window, the sun was setting, painting the Martian sky in brilliant colors. Human ships moved across that sky, carrying people who would help shape the future of not just one species, but many. The architect's experiment hadn't gone according to plan, but perhaps that had been for the best. After all, the universe didn't need another race of beings who only knew how to follow plans. It needed teachers, explorers, and guardians who understood the value of letting others find their own way. It needed humans. Humanity's rise to a multiplanetary species hadn't gone as planned. It had gone much, much better.